I think the other thing which also has changed
Yeah.
from a connectivity perspective is the ability to reach applications remotely.
Mm.
Before companies were very closed off in terms of you needed to be in the office to access certain applications and certain data stores. That's changed. COVID.
Welcome to Bits, Bytes, and Beyond, the podcast that takes you beyond the buzzwords and deep into the real-world challenges of moving your data. I'm Trent Blakely, Head of Product Marketing at PCCW Global Console Connect. In each episode, we'll unpack a specific technical subject, break down what's really going on, and explore how to solve it. Whether you're a CIO, a network engineer, or simply the person who always gets asked, is it the network? Then you're in the right place. This isn't thought leadership, it's technical leadership. Now let's get into it. Today, my guest is Shaheen Kalla, Head of Presales for the UK, Ireland, and Nordics. Today we're going to be talking about last mile. Very big, kind of exciting topic that is relevant to everyone, really. It's a very interesting topic, and I think it's often confusing because there are so many, the word edge gets thrown around a lot, and it can have a lot of different meanings, right? Are you talking about the macro edge, the micro edge, the device edge? There's too many of them, and so last mile, I think, is also where there are many problems taking place. And so whether or not you have visibility to what's happening on that last mile can be a crucial component to your support experience. So, Shaheen, do you want to introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, so Shaheen, as I've been introduced, I've been doing this for close on to 27, 28 odd years. I've been part of lots of different organizations throughout my career. I've sat on both enterprise and I've sat on wholesale, I've sat on carriers, and I've sat on customer side. So lots of knowledge around this, and my primary focus for most of my career has been specifically around networking. So hope to hope to enlighten you guys and give you some information around what's been going on and what's going to happen, or at least what I see is going to happen going forward.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, we have a good set of questions. I'm hopeful that this will be insightful for our audience here. I guess first we'll go ahead and dive in. So the first question, as bandwidth demand grows and applications push closer to the edge, what's the single biggest unsolved problem in last mile connectivity that you faced?
So applications have always been on the edge. It's not that applications are now being pushed more towards the edge. Application and end users have always sat on the edge. I think what's happened is your data stores have moved off edge. So your data stores have moved into cloud. Your data stores were traditionally moved into data centers, and your data stores and I don't want to call it application because end application is different, but your user base and your data always set disparate, except when they were in the same office. And then that technology or that methodology moved a long time ago, where we decentralized ourselves. So we had a centralized environment, where we had mainframes and users sitting in the same building. We moved that across from mainframes, then moved into data centers because they needed more power and cooling, and we're seeing that shift again. So we're seeing that shift where your user base is sitting in an office, Office 365, Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever the end application may be, but your data store sits cloud, or your data source sits again in a data center. So applications always set on the edge. What we've seen is, as applications become more intelligent and more aware, especially with the advent of AI, you've got a lot more traffic which flows between the end user and the actual application store, and that bandwidth is fairly fixed. So throughout the years, we've grown from 64 kilobits per second. We've now got up to 10 gigabit per second at edge, and in some locations up to 100 gigabit per second on edge. The problem that I see, and which has plagued us forever, is you buy a fixed bandwidth. It's very difficult to know how much that bandwidth is going to be, or if it's going to be enough when you deploy. When you deploy that bandwidth, you
Right.
then
You
later
need
find out
headroom.
you later find out you either need to upgrade or you need to change within contract or X, Y, Z.
Mm.
What I'd like to see is a flexibility model. So the ability to flex that bandwidth up and down as you need it. So you could buy a flat-based bearer of 1 gig with a 100 or 200 meg CDR on it, but the
Hmm.
ability to flex that bandwidth up and down. I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we're facing at the moment. Um,
And to be clear, we can do that, or lots of companies and providers can do that on, the middle mile portion of the network, but somewhat rare to, and I think, most
well, at the
providers
end,
can't offer that kind of
yeah,
flexibility on the last mile.
at the end of the day, you're still dealing with a fiber local loop which runs from a box on the corner, or a box at the bottom of the building, or a box out in a junction area somewhere,
Hmm.
and that fiber comes back. So there's that. The second part of it is it's fixed term. So
Mm.
all providers are still doing fixed term, and then the minimum term you get is 12 months. There's nothing wrong with that because generally your edge doesn't move. It's not the flexible, movable asset that you want to start moving stuff from one location to another.
Hmm.
So that's not as much of a problem as it is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you've got 6 people in the office. Thursday, everybody comes in, everybody does their reports. Your bandwidth spikes to 3, 4, 5 times what it would any other day. You
Mm.
don't have the ability to just flex up for that short term and flex it back down. So what you end up doing is you end up catering for the maximum amount and the bandwidth societal. The same
Mm.
situation we had with servers many years ago. Software deployment meant you bought one server which served one purpose, and that one purpose meant whether you had 50 teras on it and you were using 20, the rest of the 30 teras stood empty, or you had 5 CPUs and your application stack only used two, you still bought the five. With virtualization, we've seen that changing in terms of you could then run multiple machines, et cetera, et cetera. With bandwidth, that hasn't happened. We haven't evolved to that next phase, which is the ability to burst up and down based on traffic patterns. I
Mm.
think that's what's probably the biggest uh, unsolved problem, if we can call it that, because you did refer to it as an unsolved problem. It's still unsolved.
Mm. And lots of companies are just they're paying for capacity that they're not using most of the time.
Most of the time, if you look at most companies, I'm dealing currently with a company who's going out and purchasing a large amount of bandwidth for an in-case environment, and it's a fairly hefty chunk of money that they're spending,
Mm.
and they can't do it any other way because if the business ever decides to move back into everybody needs to be in the office environment, they need to cater for that. And at the same time, they need to ensure that they've got enough bandwidth that if they grow their application stack or their application changes and their bandwidth requirement changes, they need to cater for that. Their data changes, they need to cater for that.
Right. So it's a bit of an insurance policy, and that's smart architecture. It's good to have insurance, right? But
It
at the
is.
same time, you want to balance that with efficiency, of course.
Yeah. So one of the hats I wore in my past life was, I used to do disaster recovery as I used to be part of a disaster recovery company, and we used to go out to large banks and the rest of it, and you mentioned insurance policy, and they used to go, oh, but we need to spend X, Y, and Z to ensure that the environment is up. And you turn around and you go, at which point does it become a point of diminishing returns? You spend
Mm.
so much of insurance trying to keep your environment up that it actually starts costing you money in the end of the day to keep the environment up. So you
Right.
could afford to be down for an hour, and the financial impact is less than all of this money that you're putting into place by having
Hmm.
6 different backup systems. So
Right. And that's different for each business, maybe
that's
even
different
each application as you look at,
each
what
sector
uptime,
as well.
yeah,
So
what uptime is acceptable,
correct.
and that's a difficult question. I've been in many of those calls where like, what's your target SLA for availability for this system, this application that you're getting connectivity for? And almost inevitably, almost 100% of the time, they say 100%.
I love that answer because I go, oh, that's great. So that means we have unlimited budget. And they just
Yeah,
look at me like,
exactly.
no, we don't. And I go, well, if you want 100%, you need an unlimited budget. And
Right.
then you get into the details of why you need a 100% budget. And all
Yeah.
of a sudden it's, oh, actually, we could do with a couple of hours here or there. It's not that important. We'll
That's
send people home. Guys can
yeah.
work from a coffee shop, etc.
Right. Or there's time, those if it happens during the middle of the night when no one's using it, that's fine, or
Yeah. I,
okay.
I think
Well,
I think the other thing which also has changed
yeah.
from a connectivity perspective is the ability to reach applications remotely. You know,
Mm,
before companies were very closed off in terms of you needed to be in the office to access certain applications in certain data stores. That's changed. COVID's changed a lot of that in terms of how we access our data now. So, the ability to IPsec into the network or VPN into the network. Before VPNs were a very simple thing. You had a username, a password, you plugged it in, you got onto the network, and away you went. Now we deal with multi-factor authentication. We've got, the ability to log in. You can log into the network, but you can't log into the application. So the application has a different login stack to what your VPN does. You then need a separate device. You need to authenticate yourself in a different way. And I think that's driven the demand for bandwidth at the edge down rather than up. Um, because again, you talk about risk and reward. If the office is unavailable, you can work from home. You can work
right.
from a coffee shop. Works in certain environments and certain industries, like you said, in certain industries, it just doesn't. Manufacturing, for example, you can't have your staff working remotely because your IPLC network requires somebody to be on site. So again, horses for courses. It just depends on what industry you're in.
For sure. Yeah, and that's kind of along the lines of the next question we're going to get into. I want to dive deeper into this. Like you're designing resilience into the last mile specifically. What are some of those trade-offs that you have to make? And what are some of the creative solutions that you've seen actually work and which ones have actually failed? So
So,
multi-part question there. Sorry. Trade-offs, any creative solutions
okay.
that have worked or not worked.
So let's start off with when designing resilience into the last mile. Resilience into the last mile is still very dependent on building and infrastructure availability. I think that's a challenge. You can be in the center of, and I'll use my example. I live in London. You can be in the center of London, but you may be in a grade A listed building or a very old environment which only has a single duct into the actual building itself. So you only have one entry point into that building. Some buildings are only catered or lit. We use the word lit by one manufacturer or one provider. So those are some of the considerations you need to face, and that's some of the challenges that you face. Some of the trade-offs that you face are cost. It's great to have two links in, but again, if you're a small enterprise, and we spoke about this earlier, you want that 100% uptime. You need the unlimited budget. That's probably your biggest trade-off is cost.
Yeah.
Do you go out and spend twice as much money with having resilience or redundancy in your environment? But again, you do that, you still have a single duct into the building.
Mm.
You have two providers, they both run down the same cable path down the road. Somebody digs up that cable, there's a water issue, there's flooding, there's electrical issues, whatever the case is. A bus runs into the corner box and they both go to the same exchange, you still down.
Yeah.
That's
No, and that brings up
and
another
we
question. Sorry to interrupt you there. The other question that we get a lot is like, what kind of diversity do you need or want? And lots of people ask for carrier diversity, not realizing that, you might have two different carriers, but those both carriers are on the same path or,
Yeah.
reliant on the same exact box or
And
equipment
and
or,
yeah, and the worst one is, I mean, we look at certain environments. So we look at some some countries around the world where they don't actually have the luxury of multiple fiber providers in that particular city. So you go, great, we'll use two carriers. So you get a quote from carrier A and a quote from carrier B, and both of them are subscribed to the underlay network, which belongs to the incumbent who's been there for years.
right. So then you
They
get
don't
margin
they don't tell you
stacking. Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, because for them, for them it's just, hey, I'm ordering a circuit. So we'll sell you the circuit, but we don't know what the underlying infrastructure is
Right.
because a lot of times they don't have access to that. The fiber provider won't tell them, hey, I'm providing two circuits to the same environment.
Mm.
Underlay provider goes, I'm selling two circuits. Provider A salesperson goes, I'm selling my circuit. Provider B goes, I'm selling my circuit.
Yeah.
And the pre-sales person or the person who sits on the end of it needs to go, are you using the same provider? And you talk about solutions which have failed. I've seen that. I've
Yeah.
seen that in multiple occasions.
It's tricky.
The provider didn't know about it. The carriers
Right.
didn't know about it, but they all provided the same. And when that underlay network went down because there was a cable cut, all three circuits were down.
Yeah.
So you
And they
go out and you
thought
spend,
they thought they had diversity. Yeah.
yeah, and you go out and
It's
you spend this money and you've spent it over 3 or 4 years. And when you
mhm.
need your insurance
Yeah.
isn't there.
When it's time for the insurance to pay out and it doesn't,
Yep,
no, that's really disappointing. And like, I think I've seen it can be counterintuitive, but it can be sometimes better over time as well to go with a single provider because you have visibility of any kind of network grooms. Like networks change over time, obviously, and
correct.
sometimes what starts out as actually diverse paths can become one. You've seen that
So
as well.
you get different naming conventions within last mile. So,
Mm,
we talk about carrier diversity being one. I want two different carriers and I want them to take a different path. But you can buy what's known as protected circuits. So you
mm,
buy that from a single carrier, and that carrier will ensure that the paths are diverse, that they take different routing through the network, and that should one path fail, the network will auto redirect you onto the second path. That's more reliable, I would say, than carrier diversity because you
and the
have a
protection, that protection level should survive any kind of network grooms that carrier does.
correct. That's the one side of it. Then the second side of it is it's usually backed by a very, very robust SLA. So you can get up to 5 lines depending on what you're ordering from them.
Hmm.
Within Africa, and we see this a lot in Africa, is when we order these type of circuits, or we order protected circuits or protection on the last mile, you'll find that the carrier actually provides you a fiber last mile as your primary, but they'll give you a wireless link
Right.
as your backup. Because
Mm,
remember, we talk about last mile and we talk about it in Europe or the US or Asia. We go, oh, it's a fiber last mile. But in Africa, there's still a lot of countries where the
many.
distance is
Yeah.
far too long.
Yeah.
Distance to pop, you're talking 30, 40 kilometers, sometimes 100 kilometers.
Hmm.
In that instance, you can't guarantee that somebody is not going to dig up a cable 100 meters down, 100 kilometers
Yeah.
down the line or 50 kilometers
Well, yeah,
down
the
the line.
access
So,
method, you want
yeah,
access method diversity. That's,
correct.
whether,
So we
and
see
we're
that,
going to get into this a little bit more like 5G and low Earth
yeah,
orbit at satellite and things like that.
yeah. So
Okay.
to answer your question, when designing resilience, know what type of resilience you want.
Hmm.
What are your trade-offs? How much do you want to spend primarily? And do you have the equipment that can support multiple carriers and multiple paths? And then creative solutions which have actually worked, like I said, multi-path, diversity in terms of protection, types of technology, types of media used. And
Fantastic.
lots of incidences where we've seen stuff fail.
For sure. Okay. And so next, that's perfect. Next question. We already kind of touched on this a little bit, but like the shift to cloud and SaaS has changed the way we approach last mile connectivity compared to the old data center model.
Yeah.
We've already kind of
So
covered that.
we've
Do you
kind
feel,
of
or do
we've
you want
kind
to
of
add some
covered
more?
that already. But maybe I can delve into the old data center model. So the
Okay.
old data center model had you connecting from your office back to your DC via a private link. So it was a point-to-point link from your office location to that data center. What typically we found back then, and we still find it now, is user experience. User experience was moving from a server we set on a 1 gig LAN network, because back then we didn't have 10 gig and 100 gig. You set on a 1 gig network, and the minute you moved it across to the data center, you were throttled by a 100 meg link because it was expensive. So your user experience suffered the most. What we're seeing with cloud is you can now buy cheap internet bandwidth. The internet's become really cheap in terms of you just looking for internet access. You can go out and get broadband for pennies to the megabit per second. Um, that's primarily been the shift from cloud to the old data center model. Is before we were buying very expensive point-to-point links. Now we buy very, very cheap internet links.
And then overlay something or run a GRE
Correct.
tunnel or a VPN or
You could if you wanted to, but most people don't.
hmm,
So, you're reliant on your SaaS provider or your application provider to give you the security you need. Your web browser has become your application, your actual end application, because most of the stuff is accessed through there.
hmm,
And where you have bespoke applications, again, it uses standard protocols or traditional internet underlay. So there's no real need unless you're accessing a private environment within a SaaS solution or a private environment within a cloud solution.
hmm. Yeah, so it really depends on the application and how sensitive that data in that application is.
Correct.
What degree of security you want to go to, including a fully private link, excuse me, including a fully private link or like a GRE or a VPN.
Correct. And I think there's still a demand, or there's still a requirement for private links. Certain companies and certain industries require you to still have that. So,
Hmm.
if you're accessing your Azure private environment or your AWS Elastic Cloud or your Google or your GCP environment, you want a level of security which goes over and above what the internet gives you.
Right. And yeah, some applications can't tolerate the unpredictable latency and congestion of the internet. They need a more
That's
predictable
correct.
level of
And
latency.
but and remember, a lot of companies are now doing voice over this as well.
Hmm.
When it comes to voice, you want to prioritize your voice traffic. You don't want to be running a video conference environment and somebody fires up a YouTube video and all of a sudden your conferencing
Exactly.
facility falls apart. So it's a matter of what do you want to prioritize, where do you want to prioritize it, and what is the business impact if you don't. Send all internet YouTube traffic over the internet, fine. Somebody's video buffers, it's not an issue.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the CEO having a voice call or CFO having a voice call, you want to prioritize that type of traffic.
Yep. Yeah. Not to mention any kind of traffic leaving the cloud is subject to egress fees, and egress fees are lower if it's a private link versus the internet. Okay. Well, let's see. Next question. This also is something we've already kind of touched on, but I guess how else have you seen last mile change over the last 5 to 10 years?
5 to 10 years. 10 years ago, we were still selling 20, 30 megs of internet, and it seemed like a lot. Um, 5 years ago, we weren't selling private connectivity because everybody was sitting at home during COVID. So we've seen a massive spike in broadband
Yeah.
and broadband services, and we've seen applications change to cater for that more than last mile. We've seen applications move to being more remote user friendly. What have I seen in the last 5 to 10 years? Like I said, it's just a massive shift in terms of the amount of bandwidth that's required.
Hmm.
Bandwidth, the requirements just keep on increasing. They increase in different ways now. 10 years ago, you weren't streaming Netflix at the same time you were trying to hold a video conference at the same time your kids were trying to do online schooling. So we've seen that change. I remember 10 years ago, trying to think now, 10 years ago, I was really chuffed. I had a 40 meg link which was delivered over copper.
Yep.
I now have a 1 gig link which is delivered over fiber. That's the
Much better.
massive change. And reliability as well,
Yeah.
from a copper-based environment. When it rained or if the weather was crappy or somebody was busy with something else, the network would be flaky. Now we're seeing speed guarantees on broadband services. We never seen that 5 years
Right.
ago, even
That
10 years
used to
ago.
be very unrealistic.
It used to be, we'll give you the best effort. So you sign up to
Right.
100 meg, and if you get 5 meg, sorry, look at your terms and
Yeah.
conditions, and that's it. Now you go, we'll give you a guarantee, or if you buy 100 meg, we'll give you a 80 meg guarantee, and if you don't get it, we'll give you a refund.
Mm,
That's the change that I've
right.
seen
Yeah.
probably
So
in the past
B2C
5 years.
is taking a page out of the B2B book in
Correct.
that sense. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. So we touched on this earlier, as far as access methods, right? Do you see technologies like 5G or LEO satellites as realistic last mile replacements in enterprise environments or only as niche backups?
This is a difficult one, and I'll tell you why. Because 5G backup works great in developed countries.
Mm,
So where bandwidth or where 5G technology is really cheap. So we talk about the likes of the UK or US or Asia. You can buy a SIM card for next to nothing and get unlimited data for the month. You move to Africa and it's a charge per megabyte that you consume. So while it's great as a backup technology, you cannot ever use it as a full-time technology because your data charges just become far too high.
mm,
So it has its place in the market, but it needs to be evaluated as to when do you need to use it, how much do you need to use it, and how often do you expect to use it. It's not going to be a daily, let's run the entire office over 5G. 5G is not there yet. It
mhm,
might be in a couple of years. But remember, when you're talking 5G, your biggest congestion point is still your nearest cell tower. So if you're in a highly congested environment, and we all see it, right? We go to a concert, you go to a sporting event, you can have the best 5G phone with the best 5G card, and then your network tells you, we have the best 5G coverage. And you sit there and you're trying to send a text message and you can't because because the cell tower is overloaded.
mhm.
So,
Right. Those situations where like lots of people have 5G backups and then everyone loses their wireline service,
yeah,
then everyone switches to their 5G, then it's congested if you're all on
then
the
it is
same.
congested. Exactly. So is it is it a viable technology? Yes. Is it reliable most of the time?
Mm,
Is it something I would go out and invest in to run my office on a daily basis? No. So I
mhm.
would never use that for that, right?
Okay. So
Leo,
very location dependent also, like you
very
were saying,
location
country by
dependent,
country. Yeah.
country by country, data package size dependent,
Hmm.
cost dependent, equipment dependent. So lots of different parameters you need to take into consideration for that. Leo satellites have taken off purely because of Mr. Musk and his Starlink environment. And we're seeing that. Very few people go and actually look at the cost of Leo for business. So Leo
Mm,
for consumer, great. He doesn't give you a guarantee of bandwidth. He tells you you're the first one on the network, the service is great. You're the 150th one in your block on the network. All of a sudden, your speed drops off.
mm,
Again, unreliable, non-guaranteed bandwidth, etc., etc. If you want to buy his premium business Leo environment, it comes at a cost. And usually that cost is probably about the same, if not more, than putting in a secondary local loop.
mm.
The advantage of it is, again, you're not reliant on ground technology. You have a different type of technology. But again, comes with its own setbacks. Latency dependent, depending on which Earth station they drop you at. IP addressing is structured based on him. He won't allow you to do certain things in terms of advertising routes and how routes work and the rest of it. So again, very complicated if you're running an enterprise business or if you're running a wholesale business as to how you integrate that. Can be done, has been done, but you need a lot of technical skills to make it work. It's not a
Hmm.
plug and play model.
Yeah, I think people look at the price tag of the consumer Leo offerings out there, and they're like, oh, that would be great. Sounds great. It's just a backup. But then it can have the same challenges of any backup
Yeah.
under certain conditions, and like you're saying, there's some gotchas that they don't exactly these providers won't jump out and say, hey, just so you know, it's not going to be like this, or this is a limitation, or you can't do the IP addressing that you're used to, or like you're
Yeah.
saying,
So, I mean, Trent, to give you an idea, this year alone, I've completed 4 RFPs with large banking companies who want to look at Leo. And the minute you put the Leo proposal down and you state all of the, the
the
gotchas, so to speak,
limitations and
or
costs. Yeah.
what we would typically call exclusions,
Hmm.
it becomes a very different discussion because they go, oh, but why didn't they tell us this and why didn't they tell us that? They're not going to. They have to
Yeah.
sell you something,
They
right?
want to make money. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, that makes sense. Okay. So the main, or last but not least, if you had a blank slate, right, how would you sort of reimagine the last mile for today's distributed workforce and hybrid work cloud world? We see in research close to 90% of enterprises are doing some form of hybrid cloud, whether that's multiple private, multiple public, you know, how would you redesign the last mile for that?
I wouldn't actually. I think the last
Hmm.
mile has evolved to a point where it's fairly robust. It's a known technology. It's been around for the last 30, 40 odd years. There's a lot of development which has gone into it. While everybody still focuses on applications and software, and we're seeing the advent of AI and the rest of it, the last mile is kind of like it's like the internal combustion engine. It's reliable, it's got technology, it's moved with the times. People may see it as antiquated, but when your battery dies in your EV, it gets you home, if I can put it that way. So I wouldn't change the last mile per se. What I would probably look at is how is last mile effectively being used? So as an enterprise customer, I'd want to be able to swing traffic between my internet, my office, my home users, or the ability to bundle it all together from a single provider. So go to a single provider and go, I want to buy 2 terabits, 2 terabit per second of bandwidth from you. But I want the ability to swing that traffic based on where my usage is needed at the time.
So more of a shared data pool type model.
More of a shared data pool type model, but it's not a pool of data, it's a pool of bandwidth.
Hmm.
So, if I have an office in Hong Kong that needs to speak to an environment in London, I know my Hong Kong users are in the office in the morning. So steer my traffic to my Hong Kong office in the morning, steer it to my Dubai office in the afternoon, steer it to my London office late in the afternoon, steer it to my US office in the evening, so that I constantly have optimal bandwidth in my network. And then again, the ability to plug into my home users or my remote users networks and buy at a cheaper rate for them so that they don't need to go out and buy their own internet access. But that internet access has two services on it. It has one service which connects back into my private cloud and my private network, and another service which connects them up to the internet. And I can subsidize that, and that becomes a tax write-off, and. So there's lots of different things that I do around it. I'd also start using AI within networking, and I think that's something that we're not doing. So application-aware AI routing on the network. So you don't have somebody who's going, oh, I need to now reconfigure from Hong Kong. I need to move that bandwidth to Dubai, and then I need to move it to London. The ability to go for the, for the for the AI to learn what the traffic patterns are, to build up a model around it in terms of where to steer traffic when, to be application aware, to go, my application in the morning is email because everybody comes in and logs on to email. My application in late afternoon is monday.com because they want to set their schedule for the next day or they're completing tasks or whatever the case is. So the ability to use AI within the backbone network to be able to steer traffic, where it needs to go, how it needs to go, and the ability to provide this as a single bundle package.
That's really interesting. No, the changes in customer experience, I think, would be welcome.
Yeah,
And I think you're kind of alluding to the just the overall simplicity of the service, right? And how it would just work, right? I think that's what
exactly.
people love about, or non-technologists love about certain technologies, that when they just work, they don't need to understand how it works or why it works, that it just works all the time, anytime they need it, that those needs are anticipated.
Yep, exactly just that. So
Interesting.
again,
Okay.
so you go, Monday is an office day in Hong Kong, so everybody's in the office on Monday, but Tuesday everybody's in the office in London and Wednesday.
Right.
So again, we talk about that model where you don't have to purchase for the maximum amount. You can share your bandwidth amongst multiple pools. You can steer your bandwidth to multiple locations. You have the ability to multiplex that bandwidth as well. So you have the ability
Mm.
to go, I want to use one last mile, but I want to deliver 5 different services across it. That's
Yeah.
something which that
The
that has
multi-access
advantages as
port.
well, multi-access ports, etc.
Hmm.
So you have the ability to go, one service is delivered as internet on VLAN A, another service is delivered on B, another one is delivered on C. But go further than that in terms of, here's a fiber pair, or here's an Ethernet cable which delivers you internet. Here's another Ethernet cable which delivers you private. Here's another Ethernet cable which delivers you connectivity to your data center. Here's another Ethernet cable, but they all run on one last mile. So you're not buying 5 different services. You're buying one service, but the ability to run uh, multiple services across
Destinations and endpoints
multiple
and use
destinations and
cases.
endpoints.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. No, I love that. I think that's very useful, and that's applicable to, I think, most enterprises. Almost everyone needs multiple types of connectivity, in my experience, and so that seems like it would be very useful. All right. Any final thoughts as we land this plane?
No, like I says, I mean, people or enterprises and wholesalers and everyone else in the IT industry who are in telco understands local loop. Local loop and connectivity is still very much a black box or an unknown for application software developers, for dev serve guys, for people who don't touch the networking side of it. They simply assume that traffic gets from one place to another. So I think for them to understand how does it get from one place to another is very important. I attended a conference last year and everybody came to show me all the different applications that they were building. And I went, so how does your application get to where it needs to get to? And everybody just answered, oh, but it's in the cloud. Yeah, but how does it get there? And the amount of people who just didn't know how their traffic got to
Yeah,
end destination.
they just gloss over it.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being my guest. This has been fascinating. And tune in next time. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Please leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at marketing@consoleconnect.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.